The sun had barely broken over the horizon at the old airfield when a battered pickup truck rumbled to a stop beside Hangar 12. The hangar doors, faded and rusted from decades of wind and rain, creaked open to reveal the skeleton of a once majestic aircraft, the legendary B-17 Flying Fortress. Dust danced in the sunlight, and in the middle of it all stood an old man, wearing oil-stained overalls and a weathered cap pulled low over his eyes. His hands, though trembling slightly, moved with purpose and precision, like someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. The airmen stationed at the base had noticed him before. To them, he was just another retiree clinging to the past, wasting time on an old relic that would never fly again. They'd pass by in groups, laughing quietly as they saw the frail figure sanding down rusted panels or crawling beneath the fuselage. "Guess Grandpa's building himself a time machine," one joked. "Yeah," another laughed, "maybe he's planning to bomb Berlin again." The old man didn't respond. He never did. He just wiped the sweat from his brow, tightened a bolt, and kept working. But what the young airman didn't know was that this man wasn't just restoring a plane. He was restoring a memory, a promise. "Hey, old-timer," one of them shouted across the hangar, "need a crane or a time machine to finish that thing?" The group of airmen burst into laughter. Walter didn't even look up. He just took a slow breath, wiped the grease off his hands with a rag, and went back to work. His silence only made them laugh harder. To the airmen, he looked like a relic, a tired old man fighting a losing battle against time. But inside that wrinkled face and tired frame lived memories they couldn't imagine: the roar of engines over flak-filled skies, the trembling of metal as bombs fell from the belly of the beast, and the voices of brothers in arms fading into static over the radio. That night, long after everyone left, Walter stayed behind. The hangar lights flickered as he carefully traced his hand along the cold aluminum skin of the plane. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Almost there, boys, almost there." He closed his eyes, remembering the faces of his crew: Jimmy, the navigator who used to hum jazz before missions; Tom, the tail gunner who swore he could see angels in the clouds; and Lieutenant Brooks, his co-pilot, who never made it back. Each rivet he tightened, each wire he repaired, felt like reaching out to them again. One morning, as Walter was working beneath the wing, a new officer, Colonel Hayes, arrived at the base. A strict man in his 50s, he had heard rumors of the crazy old mechanic working on a World War II bomber. Curious, he decided to see for himself. When he entered the hangar, he found Walter lying on his back, tools scattered beside him, humming softly as he worked. The colonel's sharp eyes noticed the faded patches on the man's jacket hanging nearby, an old leather bomber jacket with worn insignias. Then he froze. On the sleeve, there was a distinguished flying cross, a silver star, and a patch with combat aircrew wings, symbols of someone who had seen and survived the worst of war. "Good morning, sir," Hayes greeted, his tone shifting to respect. "You restoring this bird all by yourself?" Walter slowly sat up and smiled faintly. "Just trying to bring an old friend back to life." Hayes walked around the plane, studying it closely. "B-17G model. These things flew over my grandfather's stories." "You served, didn't you?" Walter nodded, his voice low. "I didn't just serve, son. I flew her sisters, through hell and back." The colonel didn't speak. He stood there silently for a moment, realizing who this man really was. Word spread quickly across the base. The airmen who once mocked him now felt a sting of shame. They gathered near the hangar door, peeking inside as Walter and the colonel talked about missions, formations, and survival. That afternoon, a group of them, led by a young airman named Derek, approached Walter. "Sir, we didn't know," Derek said quietly. "We're sorry for the way we treated you. We just thought." Walter smiled kindly. "You thought I was just an old man chasing memories. Don't worry, son, you weren't wrong. That's exactly what I'm doing." He chuckled softly. "But some memories are worth chasing." The young men offered to help, and for the first time, Walter accepted. Together, they worked through the weeks, sanding, painting, and polishing the massive bomber back to glory. The laughter in the hangar returned, but this time it was shared, warm, and full of respect. During one of those long workdays, Derek asked, "Captain, why go through all this trouble? She'll never fly again." Walter looked at him, his eyes distant but shining. "She doesn't need to fly. She just needs to stand, so people remember the price that was paid for the sky to be free." Those words hit everyone deeply. No one ever teased him again. Months passed. The day finally came when the B-17 flying fortress, now fully restored, stood proudly under the sunlight. Polished to silver perfection, with her nose art, Miss Eleanor, shining bright, she looked almost alive. The airmen, officers, and even local veterans gathered for the unveiling. Walter, dressed in his old uniform, stood before the massive aircraft. His medals glimmered faintly on his chest, but his eyes were fixed on the plane, the living memory of a time when courage was the only fuel that mattered. Colonel Hayes handed him the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the colonel said, his voice full of reverence, "this man is Captain Walter Harris, a true hero of the skies. He flew 25 combat missions in a B-17 during the war. And today, he's given us a gift far greater than this plane. He's given us a piece of history, a lesson in honor." Applause filled the hangar, but Walter lifted his hand gently, signaling for quiet. His voice was soft but carried through the air like a prayer. "I didn't do this for medals or memories. I did it because this plane, and men like her, remind us that freedom isn't free. We built it, flew it, and some of us never came home. But as long as one of these birds still stands, their stories will never fade." He paused, looking up at the sky, tears glinting in his old eyes. "Fly high, boys. We did it. That night, long after the crowd had left, the airmen returned to the hangar. They found Walter sitting quietly beneath the wing of Miss Eleanor, his cap in his lap. The lights flickered softly, and for a moment, he looked peaceful, like a soldier finally at rest. When they approached, they realized he wasn't asleep. Walter Harris had passed away, a faint smile on his face, his hand resting on the metal of the plane he loved so much. A few days later, at his funeral, the airmen and Colonel Hayes stood in full salute as the engines of Miss Eleanor were fired up one last time. The old bomber's engines roared to life, echoing across the airfield, not in flight, but in spirit. As the sound faded into the wind, Derek whispered, "Rest easy, Captain. The fortress stands, and so does your legacy."